What's up, guys? I wanted to make this video because this is how my brain works. And I'm sure other people's brains work similarly because anytime I'm going into anything kind of new or unknown, I always like to ask myself, like, what's the worst case scenario here? Like, what are the downsides? Like, what am I potentially in for if things don't go how I have that, how I would love for them to go? And it's very easy to just focus on the wins and the success stories, right? And like, I love it. Don't get me wrong. My clients are happy. People are happy. I love it. That's what I'm doing this for, is to get people the results that they're after. Does that happen smoothly and seamlessly and without any trouble all the time? No, it doesn't. There are things that come up in ways that people can definitely get frustrated. Now, I'm going to talk about what can kind of like not meet someone's expectations here, but I'm also going to give the contrarian point to that, because when I started with this, like, part of my healing was just like knowing what was actually going on in my body and having that peace of mind, because, and you can probably relate to this, years of dealing with like weird mystery health symptoms that nobody can tell you what's going on, it kind of drives you mad and it really messes with your head. And it did me. And I was like, I hated that feeling. I did not like not knowing what was happening in my body. And when that's the case, like, your mind can go to these like dark places and like, oh my God, what if it's this? What if it's that? And, I did reach a point where I was convinced, like, I'm not going to make it out of my 30s. Like, there's no way with the health the way it is, like, I'm going to survive and I'm going to have a life after this. So that was a big part of the healing right there. So I highly encourage people to, learn more about what the true root cause of your symptom can be and really take that to heart. And if that doesn't make sense to you, I get it, because you've been told by other practitioners or you've read online that, oh, it's this, it's mold, it's this, it's stress, it's whatever, it's your poor diet, lack of exercise. And it's turned out those things have not been true. So we've all been burned in the past. I get that. But at some point, like, if you really want to get a deep level of healing, you're going to need to get on board. And part of that can be like reading the explanation, reading about Epstein-Barr, if that's your scenario, learning more about that. And then just asking yourself, like, bringing your own questions and concerns to the forefront. Like, well, how is this possible? How would this, like, how would we know this? And just voicing, even if it's to yourself, your own questions about this. Highly recommend doing that. Okay, so let's get into it. So the downsides that I've seen, both in just kind of watching people try to implement medical medium protocols and with some of my clients, this definitely happens. Now, I'm prepared. I stick with my clients until they get some positive traction in their healing, right? Like, I'm not here to, like, not help people. I'm here to watch people get results. But I've also seen people kind of like get discouraged, even though I tell everyone this in the beginning and like, hey, like, hopefully we do get amazing results pretty quickly within a couple months. And a lot of times that does happen. It doesn't mean everything's going to be completely healed in that time frame, but a lot of times people are going to see some positive traction that's going to be very different than anything they've had before. And that's great. That's exciting. We can use that as motivation to continue doing the cleansing and healing protocols that are going to take you ultimately to where you want to go. But here's some downsides. Sometimes that takes longer than what you want or what you expected. It does. Sometimes it does. And we'll go over the reasons potentially why these things happen. But that's a reality. Sometimes it can take longer than you want. And you can hear about all these other people like, oh, they had the same conditions as me or similar symptoms, and they seem to be really good after X amount of time. Well, it's been X amount of time for me, and I don't feel that good yet. So, like, what gives there? That's a dangerous comparison game to play. And again, we'll go into why that is in a moment. Another downside is that you're going to have to do some deeper cleansing than you want to. So what I mean by that is, I get everyone, we build the foundation with the food. That's the first thing that has to start, because there's the daily kind of routine with food that has some amount of cleansing. And then there are deeper cleanses that you can go into periodically. And those are amazing tools to move the needle faster. So the first thing we have to do is we have to get your foundational, your day-to-day up and running, so that you're not like doing some pretty good deeper cleanse work. But then when you come off that deeper cleanse, you go back to stuff that's counterproductive for your goal. So first we get the day-to-day, and then we can go into some of those deeper cleanses. Now, for some people, they do the day-to-day, they get that fixed. And for them, even though nobody has told them explicitly, like, that's all you'll have to do, they think like, I've already made a ton of changes. So if I'm not getting the results I want yet, then that must mean this is not going to work for me. And for whatever reason, they might not be willing or able to, I'll say they might not be willing to start to go into that deeper cleansing process. A lot of this has to do with arbitrary expectations and milestones that people give themselves, right? And when that happens, that can lead to lots of disappointment, lots of frustration, which I get it. And I agree. I agree it's not fair. It sucks that any of us ever had to be sick. It's absolutely not fair. But that doesn't change what actually needs to happen for you to get the progress with your health, right? You still have to do what needs to be done. So a lot of times when we break through and we get into those deeper cleanses, and sometimes you have to do multiple rounds of those deeper cleanses to really see that progress that you have. And I get it. That's another big step after you've just taken one big step, but it's there for you. It's there. Anyone can do this. If your priority is to heal, it's sitting right there. The instructions are laid out on what needs to happen. So like an extreme example is if somebody was trying to heal an autoimmune condition and they did several months, they got the foundational day-to-day right. They're, it's looking pretty good. Like they're, really avoided the troublemaker foods. They're eating lots of fruits and vegetables. But they weren't making the progress they wanted to see. Okay. I get it. We have to go into those deeper cleanses. And if we play that out, and the game that mentally you should play is like, all right, over the next couple months, let me see how many rounds, how much deeper cleansing I can do over the next, 2-3 months. And then you might want to expand that time horizon. You might want to say, over the next year, over the next 2 years, how much deep cleansing work do I want to be able to look back and say that I've accomplished? Because your body will heal. All of our bodies are the same. Now, if you're on death's door, unfortunately, that can present a different set of problems. And sometimes there is there can be times where it's too little, too late, right? It's a sad reality. But for everyone else, you just need to get to work doing what needs to be done to get your results. Now, if someone's not willing to do that, free will, that's fine. But we can't blame the protocols. We can't say this didn't work because it's crazy, but this stuff works across the board. Some people have a much longer and arduous path than others. Some people go much more quickly. That's true. That's a reality. But at the end of the day, again, I'll keep saying this, you just have to do what you have to do. And it's going to be more cleansing, doubling down on the protocols, seeing what else you can improve upon, basically. Then sometimes there are unavoidable exposures. Some people might be exposed to chemical fragrances at work all the time. There's a host of these things that potentially can slow down and kind of throw you off track. But again, that still doesn't change what you would need to do. You still just need to continue on that cleansing path. So the reason why people kind of get frustrated or thrown off when their expectations aren't met, and it doesn't make sense to them of like, well, this person did it X amount of time and I've got similar symptoms, so what gives? There's factors unknown that we're just not going to have an accurate picture of to a T when we get started with this cleansing work. But again, none of this changes what needs to be done. So it's good to have this, surface level understanding of this for peace of mind. But once that kind of sets in, then it almost is like that mentality of like, all right, back to work. What else do we have to do? So we never know exactly how many pathogens somebody has, what types, what strains. There's no testing that gets close to that, to being able to accurately depict what's actually happening in the body. So we know pathogens are an issue in the vast majority of chronic health issues. But again, somebody could have a strain of Epstein-Barr that's less aggressive. Somebody could have multiple strains of Epstein-Barr that are more aggressive. You can have Epstein-Barr plus shingles plus HHV6 plus CMV plus strep bacteria, and all these multitude of different strains that behave different ways in the body, right? And generally, the more aggressive or the more pathogens you have, the more work it's going to take to kill them off. We don't know exactly how many toxic heavy metals somebody has in their body. We don't know exactly where in their body. We don't know what different alloys they've formed. We don't know how long they've been there. We don't know how much they've oxidized and rusted and bled out and saturated other tissue nearby. But we know everyone has heavy metals. So there are factors there. The longer they've been around, the more they've oxidized, the longer it's going to take to pull those out. We don't know the health exactly. We don't know how strong your liver is exactly. We don't know how strong your adrenals are. We don't know what your pancreas is up to. For sure. I mean, there are tests that can kind of give us some idea, but people come into these protocols with different levels of health, right? Some people aren't as banged up as others when they get started. And then there's the stress levels. Is somebody living a very high stress lifestyle? Those stress hormones, that's going to play a role because those create more work for your adrenals and your liver, and they're tough on your immune system, right? So in math, there's a formula called power sets where you can kind of, say, okay, well, I have X amount of pathogens possible. I have X amount of toxins possible. What are all the different potential combinations that could play out in? In other words, like how many unique circumstances are possible? And if you just do this conservatively, with pathogens and toxins, conservative numbers, it's in like the septillion amounts of different combinations, which for our purposes is infinite. There's infinite possible combinations here of presentations. And that's why we're all snowflakes when it comes to our health or lack thereof. And so that's the explanation as to why you should not compare yourself to anyone else in their journey. You should just focus on doing the best that you can do. Each day, you have free will. You have choices of what goes into your body and what does not go into your body. You want to make the best choices if healing is your goal. And if you do that and you're steadfast and you continue, you'll get results. I'm not saying it won't be hard at times. It can be hard, 100%. But again, I'm assuming you're here and you've watched this much of the video because healing is a top priority for you. Great. Let's do it. Let's just heal the body and kind of let those expectations of timeframes, let's just kind of let those fall to the side for now and not get so caught up in them. So again, as I've mentioned several times, expectations, your expectations of what should be happening can really send you down a pointless path. And it's in that path of where we become the victim mentality of like, this is not fair. Like, why is this happening to me? And I get it. It's natural to go into that, at least for a little bit, for a lot of people. And you can have that moment, but let's have that moment, and then let's get back on course, and let's keep plugging away. Let's keep doing what needs to be doing. Let's have some faith in your body that your body is going to heal, because it will if you're doing the right things for long enough. But when these doubts kind of creep in, if your expectations have not been met, a lot of people, they'll get drawn off course. And that can look like they go back to things that they were doing previously, like maybe they'll want to add more protein, or maybe they'll go back to some old cleanses or old supplements that are actually not serving them, because they get confused, and they again, it's the expectations were not met. And when that happens, that actually can set back your healing, depending on how far back you go. And it's interesting, because once you're doing the right things for your body, and you've helped out your immune system for months, you've helped out, your adrenals are stronger, your liver is functioning much better, and you go off and you do some stuff that is not beneficial to you, you can get away with it. And it might give you a little adrenaline pump, and you might confuse that with actual healing and feeling better. And that's where people get really, really lost. And then hopefully they make it back here at some point. But I don't think a lot of them do. I think a lot of them just call it quits on this, which is very sad. Yeah. So I say all the time, the only way this doesn't work is if you give up. If you give up, yeah, it's not going to work. But if you stick to it, if you keep getting your questions answered, you'll stay the course, and you'll get to where you want to be at some point, even though it might not be in that time frame that you were hoping for. That's the beauty of these protocols, but it's also what makes it very confusing for a lot of people, is that there is no, oh, you have this, just do that, and here's the time frame. If you think about it, that goes back to the Western medical model of things. Like everything has to fit in this nice little box, and if it doesn't fit in that little box, we throw it away. And the beauty of this is there is no one protocol, and there's always things that you can do and add in to accelerate your healing. But that's tough for people to wrap their heads around, and it's understandable. I mean, they don't do this a lot, right? They're not trying to heal. They don't have a lot of experience. Unfortunately, they don't have any experience healing themselves at a deep level. So this is all new. It'd be similar to, like, if I told you, with enough training, anyone can make, 10 free throws in a row in basketball or something like that. And then you just go out and you practice, and you see a couple other people who never played basketball before, and they do some practice, and it takes them a while, but eventually they make those 10 free throws in a row. And for you, for some reason, it just doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen as fast as you watch those other people make them. You're going to start to question things. Or I shouldn't say you're going to. Some people will start to question things. But if you don't get sucked into that mindset, instead, if you fully believe it, if you're like, yeah, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to, I believe that. I believe I can make 10 free throws in a row. That's reasonable. Like, I'm not that different than anyone else. And if you have that mindset and you just ignore the noise and you keep practicing what you're supposed to practice, are you eventually going to hit 10 free throws in a row? Yeah, it's going to happen. It might not happen as fast as the other people you watch do it, but you're going to get there. But if you don't hit it in that same time frame that the other people did, and you start to question things, you're like, oh man, maybe I'm doing something wrong, and maybe I should practice this other way, because it's just they got it quicker, so maybe it's just not going to work for me. You just go down that path that leads you nowhere. It leads you back to everything that you were doing before. what's the point of that? When I started this, I was like, it makes sense. You know, I'm going to see this through. And I did that with lots of things until people ran out of answers for me on, you know, doing keto or paleo. And everyone's like, well, they can't answer very many questions for you. With these protocols, there are answers. You might not love them, but there are answers. There are explanations for why these things happen, why people take different times to heal. So, you know, my hope for everyone that I work with or that tries this or wants to heal and comes across this information is that you just stick with it and you fight for your health and you fight to stay on track and you fight to make this stuff work, because it does work. It does work. It just does not look exactly how you probably thought it would. And, you know, that's the deal. So at the end of the day, do you want to be right or do you want to heal? You know, that's kind of the decision that comes down to. Sorry if this seemed a little harsh. I feel terrible when people give up. And, you know, I've seen it so much over the years of people who, you know, I'd be like, hey, just go do medical medium. And they start it and they don't follow through. You know, it doesn't make sense to them. They don't, you know, they get scared or whatever. So I just really want to stress these protocols work, but you're going to probably have to do more than you thought you would have to. Or, you know, like it's just not going to look how you thought it would look. And that's okay. That's how it goes for lots and lots of people. So hang in there. You got this. You can heal. And that's it for today.